Hi, I'm Neil Greenberger. Welcome to County Cable Montgomery's In the Loop show, where we talk about issues and topics that you probably won't hear about elsewhere. Today, our special guest, Councilmember Nancy Floreen. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Neil.
Well, most of the past few months, you've been doing what Council often does from February to March, really involved in the budget, but you also find time to get out in the community, and I think most people know that few people get out more as elected officials than you do to all different types of people. Before we get into a couple of the issues that you've been working on, specifically as your title as chair of the Planning, Housing, and Economic Development Committee, which covers a wide range of things, there's no doubt about it. How do you manage to get out to all these things, and why do you do it? People see you, they meet you here. We have many formal events where people can meet you, but you're always going to these events of all types.
Well, I have always made it a really important priority to try to get to as many community-based events, things, conversations that I can. I really need to listen to people, hear what's on their minds, and it's a great opportunity to explain what we're doing in a way that's informal, it's not controversial. Here at the council, when we hear from folks, there's usually an issue, and there's a position or on one side or the other that they're advocating for, or that we're arguing about amongst ourselves. And it's really not necessarily a listening experience. Even our public hearings, folks are limited to a certain, just 3 minutes. There's no give and take. We don't really have much of an exchange, as much as we try, and certainly I meet with folks in my office all the time. But out in people's living rooms, backyards, at community events, I really get to say to them, you know, what's going on? What's happening? Tell me so I can know. And I find it really very helpful to gauge a community's point of view.
We've been through several tough years here in Montgomery County, the whole nation really. Things are starting to loosen up a little bit. There's some optimism. When you go out and talk to people and it's not a formal agenda, what are some of the things that you hear commonly that they want to know about, or they're looking forward to, or they regret that has happened?
You know, it's actually funny. Unless it's if I'm going to a meeting of a group where I'm on the agenda, even, I don't hear a lot of issues. Most of the concerns that folks have that we address tend to be very local issues. Trees coming down, neighbor has an issue, what about my pothole, the bus is late, that kind of a thing. Generically, I hear relatively positive comments about what we're doing and what the county's doing.
That's a good thing.
Yeah, it is. But I think it's important for them to know that they can talk to me about whatever it is that's on their minds, and I think they value that and appreciate the opportunity to ask a question. What is that story about? Typically, it's whatever was in the paper recently that's on that people want to know about.
Well, speaking of
Transit Center is a good one.
Transit Center, I may hear about that a lot.
Yeah, that's the one. Actually, that's the issue du jour.
And you will hear much about that throughout the next year. On that level where people are not afraid to ask you personal, direct questions. In the past couple of years, you went public with the fact that you had breast cancer, went through treatment. I'm sure people ask you all the time, so I'm going to ask you, how are you feeling? I'm
fine. I had a really kind of very modest variety. I was very lucky. They got it early, and it's over. So.
The experience of just going through it and everything you did go through changed the way you approach your life as a council member, your life in general?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, it reminds you of what are the important priorities. Always put your family first, no matter where you are, whatever your job is, that's what you need to do. And one of the things I also learned is what not to say to people in need. Don't pretend that you know that they're going to be fine, because you don't. And if you're going to offer to help someone, don't say, let me know if I can help. Say, I'm bringing over dinner next Thursday. Two helpful tips.
Those are great tips, and you learned them the hard way, but maybe in a good way. Well, let's talk about business. Planning, Housing, Economic Development Committee. What a title. But it has a lot of important roles in this county. And what you've been doing throughout the spring, part of the summer, council's going to be addressing throughout the fall, rewriting the zoning code for the first time in 35 years in this county. Some significant changes, some things that just need to be addressed. A lot of it is about major development. Why should people who are just small business owners or residents in neighborhoods care about what you're talking about? Well,
the zoning ordinance rewrite is not really the big deal, I think, that some people make it out to be. We're modernizing it. There are some standards being changed. There are some issues that have come up. The planning board is trying to make it a little bit more flexible, allow some variety in uses, and there's some communities of interest, certainly from the civic community, that see that as sort of changing the scope of what we do traditionally. But what we've learned as we've worked through this so far, and we're about more than halfway through our review, is that most of the concerns that we've heard are concerns that you might have anyways, because the Planning Commission is really bringing to light a lot of things that are in the zoning ordinance. They were hard to find now, and mysterious in how they were applied.
Maybe just need bigger type.
Well, there's that. But, you know, with a 30-year-old document, it's been tinkered with over the years. And changes have been made. There are a number of provisions that call for some inconsistent results. It's hard to follow. And a lot of opportunity, rights to develop in particular, are in the ordinance that some community members didn't know about. It turns out you can apply to have your a neighborhood rezoned today. And it's not the provision proposed in the new version that permits that. It's the old version. And so understanding that these are opportunities but not necessarily things that are going to happen is an important message that we try to get out. But there really aren't that many substantive changes. Some of the sort of substantive changes in it are ones we'd already adopted, things like permitting more lenient rules for accessory apartments, creating the commercial residential zone that allows for a mix of uses, both residential and residential uses in commercial zones, things like that. Those were really kind of new planning ideas that we've already introduced into this, and now there's some fine-tuning of all that.
Well, no matter whether it's through the zoning code or other things your committee has dealt with in the past couple of years, a lot of things that have come under your committee are going to change the nature of this county for quite a long time. What do you think Montgomery County is going to look like in 10 years or 20 years? We see different neighborhoods. We see White Flint beginning to change and plans for other things. Are we going to recognize it, or just going to be a little different?
It's going to change. We're going to see some evolution in our commercial areas. Our residential areas really aren't going to change. We have a general plan from 1969 in Montgomery County, and it comes as a shock to many people to hear that there is such a plan, and that we are bit by bit moving towards achieving that goal. And by that, the plan was sort of a framework, a vision for how the county will look and feel over its lifetime. And what we're seeing is the build out towards it. People are pretty shocked to hear that most commercial property, in particular in the county, is not already constructed to its full potential under the existing zoning. When we do a new master plan, sometimes we change the zoning and increase the opportunity for development, and we will see some follow through on that over the next 10 years, but not that much, really not that much. It's been mostly in the Rockville Pike corridor where people have seen change, and as far most people are pretty good with it.
And one thing I've heard you talk about, not only as a council member, an at-large council member representing everybody, and former mayor of a small jurisdiction in the county, is people are always worried, I want to see progress, I don't want it to affect my neighborhood. And you have often spoken about, don't worry, we're gonna make sure there's a balance. How do you balance it?
Well, you worry about these things, and you build in protections, and you try to find ways for communities to participate and make their concerns known. Most of our community residents are very supportive of our planning goals. They just want a voice, and they're interested in the details. And they're worried about how things are going to look and feel and affect their perception of things. So design elements are really increasingly important as we move forward. I think people get the idea that we as a region have made a huge investment in infrastructure, particularly in the metro system, and it's around those locations that they'll see a lot of growth occur. And that's been happening incrementally over the years.
A lot of this growth is going to occur as we improve transportation around the county. There's 3 major projects we're talking about all the time. Purple Line, the Corridor Cities Transitway, and building a bus rapid transit system. They all cost a lot of money and take a lot of planning. In your mind, is one more important than the other?
Well, we haven't taken any position on a bus rapid transit system, so that remains to be seen. Corridor Cities Transitway is really important as a trigger to support some of the really exciting development that could occur on the Johns Hopkins campuses in the Shady Grove, Gaithersburg area. Purple Line is a really important connection for the Red Line and on to New Carrollton. And frankly, Metro's looking at an extension of the Purple Line, or some kind of extension from that around the Beltway down to Virginia at some point. So there's a lot of potential for how this will all work. At the end of the day, it comes down to cash.
Yes.
And there's not enough of it for infrastructure across the board. So we'll see.
We're running out of time. We have a lot to talk about. Some of the things you've just been talking about cost millions, tens of millions. Billions of dollars. But there's something that the council is going to be addressing in the fall and have addressed that costs a nickel, and that's the county bag tax. And despite all these plans, people still are talking about the nickel for the bag tax. I'm not sure if all people know you were the lone member of the council to oppose it when it was originally passed. I think some of your original concerns other people are now talking about. They're talking about modifying it somewhat. Where do you think this is going to land? Do you think, have your concerns about the tax from the original panned out, or have you changed your position at all?
Well, we made a lot of money.
Yes.
What does that mean? It means a lot of people are buying plastic bags. So I'm not sure that we've really put the lid on the acquisition of plastic. I don't think that's the best way to go about that. Certainly, it's caused our residents to think differently about plastic bags, and I think that's a fine thing. Nowadays, and it's probably kept costs down for stores. I go into the hardware store, they don't even ask me if I want a bag. They say, here's your nail and your bucket, and go off and prosper. You know, what we get the most complaints about is the requirement for you to pay a fee for a bag like at a department store. The other day I was at my local post office, and the lady behind the counter said, oh, I have, and someone left a plastic bag here. Does anybody want it? And there was a big scramble for it. You know, and I'm thinking, oh, this is weird. And people are saying, I am so annoyed by that. And that is what I hear, you know, being out in the community. You hear this from people. And I find it a little embarrassing, and it's sort of, you know, if you go to Victoria's Secret, you really want people to walk around holding their underwear as they walk through the mall, as opposed to a discreet little bag. So there are some little tweaks here. We'll see how we handle that. But I would like to just focus on, we can focus on the supermarkets. That's okay.
Well, you were out in front in this one, like you are on so many other things. I'd like to talk to you about some of those other things, but we are out of time. Thank you for joining us. Our special guest today was Councilmember Nancy Floreen. You're watching In the Loop on County Cable Montgomery. I'm Neil Greenberger.